You're tuned into That's Life, where we celebrate the beauty, the chaos, and the wonder of real life. Sometimes it makes you laugh, sometimes it makes you cry, but it always makes you feel. Settle in. We're just getting started. An evening in March. The leaden sky dropped snow mixed with rain onto the earth. Underfoot, a muddy slush squelched, slippery and treacherous, causing passers-by to constantly lose their balance. Eleanor Smith stepped with extreme caution, carefully choosing where to place each foot. The last thing she wanted, on top of all her troubles, was to fall and break something. Hospital thresholds had become familiar enough as it was. Well, age was taking its toll, and the diagnosis sounded like a sentence. Turning around, the elderly woman saw the smiling face of a tall, statuesque girl with red hair. Of course, Eleanor Smith recognized her, although perhaps now she wore a different surname, not Baker, her former student. 3 years ago, Eleanor Smith had seen this class through to graduation and left the school, retiring on a well-deserved rest. They stood for a moment, exchanging a few words. It was always pleasant for the former teacher to hear about the successes of those she had once taught. Here was Lydia, for instance, mastering science at the Faculty of Finance and Economics, and even managing to work part-time. A smart girl, in short. They parted. Lydia hurried on about her business, and Eleanor Smith headed to the store. The potatoes were running out, and fresh bread wouldn't hurt. She'd take just a little of everything. How much did one person need? Before, like many of her colleagues and friends, Eleanor Smith used to torment herself with diets. But now she could afford an extra bun or candy. But the pleasure of eating had somehow vanished, and existence itself seemed to have changed. Headaches began to plague her almost immediately after retiring. The send-off had been lavish, at a table in the school cafeteria. Grateful speeches were made, each colleague recalling something good. It was a little awkward, but moving to tears. At the time of her departure, Eleanor Smith was only 60. It was scary to leave the collective and the school to which she had dedicated almost 40 years of her life teaching history. But what could she do? Children were becoming different. Finding an approach to them was harder and harder. In short, Eleanor Smith didn't wait to be asked. Realizing it was coming to that, she wrote the application herself. For a long time, the newly minted pensioner couldn't get used to her new life. At first, she would wake up at 7 in the morning and, out of habit, get ready for work. Then she'd remember there was nowhere to go. She'd lie down again, but sleep wouldn't come. Then Eleanor Smith would get up and stand by the window, watching the hurrying people. Adults rushed about their business. Children ran to school, and she felt as though she had fallen out of this stream, found herself on the sidelines of life. Nonsense, her old friend Nancy would wave away. Life only begins in retirement. Enjoy it. Nancy had been retired for a couple of years already, but she couldn't understand Eleanor Smith. Nancy had a husband, adult children, and most importantly, grandchildren, 5-year-old twins, Peter and Mary. While the parents worked, the grandparents took care of the upbringing. Nancy had a full life, people to care for. How could she understand Eleanor Smith's loneliness? And with her own children, things hadn't worked out for Eleanor Smith. No matter how much she was treated, what doctors she consulted, her husband Victor, the chief doctor of the local regional clinic, had connections, the ability to arrange a consultation with any luminary. But nothing helped, and so she remained childless. Both Eleanor Smith and her husband. How many children there were in the world, unwanted by their parents. Eleanor Smith had seen plenty of those over her years working at the school. Seemingly prosperous families, children dressed and shawled like from a picture. But still, you could see who lacked parental warmth and attention. Eleanor Smith and Victor would have been happy to raise a son, make him happy, show him the world, raise him to be a good person. But the stork never visited their home. For a long time, Eleanor Smith resigned herself to the thought that she would never be a mother. She didn't give up immediately. She fought to the last until her health began to fail. Then, at the first worrying symptoms. Her friend Nancy, who had a complete set of happiness, didn't fully appreciate it, as is often the case. She took it for granted, and even complained to Eleanor Smith, now about her lazy son, now about her fashionable daughter, and friends with children. If they wanted to, they went on a trip. If they wanted to, they lay around all day watching TV after a hard week. No lessons, no children's clinics, no endless sections and clubs. And still, Eleanor Smith suffered. She wanted to give love and affection to a native person who needed her. She was also afraid of a lonely old age, for it would come and there would be no one to even fetch her a glass of water. And then came the realization that everyone has their own fate. Eleanor Smith's was this one, not the worst, to be honest. She had a loving husband, comfort, a beloved job. It was her work to which she gave her heart and soul. At school, there were always children who needed her help. She tried to notice their problems, to support them in difficult situations. Some, besides her, had no one at all to rely on. And they were so vulnerable, so defenseless. The stories of her students still came before Eleanor Smith's eyes in the smallest details. Here, for example, Chris Miller. Everyone had turned away from him. The principal himself predicted prison for him. Teachers refused to teach if he was in the class. He was bullied from all sides. And all he needed was a heart-to-heart talk with someone who would understand, who would pity him. Eleanor Smith became that person. Chris had problems at home. His father drank, lashed out at the children, beat his wife. Eleanor Smith understood that the boy would perish in such a family. She used all her connections and arranged for the difficult but very intelligent Chris to enter a cadet school. Education with progeranium, strict discipline, all of this yielded results. Now Chris, who was considered a future criminal at school, holds a leadership position in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, is happily married and quite prosperous. And he still doesn't forget to call his favorite teacher, comes to visit to thank her once again for playing such an important role in his life. Or Anna Taylor, a quiet, withdrawn girl who couldn't even open her mouth at the board. She studied for weak C's they were given for quiet behavior. Anna had a degree of cerebral palsy. She stood out among her peers, walked a little awkwardly, her legs cramped. Eleanor Smith felt sorry for Anna and began to pay attention to her. Talking, she realized that Anna was a deep, understanding person, a little sage beyond her years. Anna confided her secret to Eleanor Smith. She secretly wrote poetry, but showed it to no one. She was shy. Eleanor Smith helped Anna believe in herself, introduced her to local poets. They appreciated the girl's talent, took her under their wing. Now, Anna is the author of several books and the head of a literary club at a local university. She has found herself and no longer seems quiet and withdrawn. Anna is a real star. There were such happy stories in Eleanor Smith's life, but it wasn't always possible to help. Here's Kate, for example. Kate Adams, a thin, tall girl with long hair the color of ripe rye, a Russian beauty, fair skin, bottomless blue eyes, regular features. Kate. This girl had serious family problems. Her father had either died or run away many years ago. Kate didn't remember him. Since then, her mother had dreamed of arranging her personal life. A young, striking woman, she chained boyfriends like gloves. And not just changed them. She dragged her child with her all over the country. Kate came to Eleanor Smith's school in the 8th grade. She never stayed anywhere longer than a year and a half because of her mother's craving for change of place. Her mother worked as a hairdresser, a profession that allowed her to easily find a job in any city. And she could also work from home, which she often did. To the city, Kate moved because of her mother's latest suitor, a new stepfather. He was a long-distance truck driver, met Kate's mother in a bar, and took her to his place. Eleanor Smith immediately noticed that Kate's life was difficult. Her eye was sharp. She had seen such children, felt their trouble. She began to watch the girl closely. Kate kept to herself. She wasn't bullied, but she didn't communicate with anyone either. She avoided conversations with classmates, tried not to participate in school events. The girl stayed at school late. She sat in the library, read, did her homework, clearly delaying her return home. One day, Eleanor Smith stayed late. The parent-teacher meeting dragged on. When they dispersed, it was dark. In the schoolyard, on a bench, she noticed a lonely, hunched figure. The sensitive woman immediately understood. This person was in trouble. She approached closer, looked intently. Kate was sitting on a bench in the school garden. Seeing Eleanor Smith, she was flustered, embarrassed. The teacher managed to get her to talk. She understood what the girl wanted, saw that she needed the involvement and sympathy of an adult, strong person. Kate spoke little. She was shy. But then she slowly opened up, told about her life. The teacher, who had seen much, learned something terrible. Her mother blamed her daughter for her failures in her personal life because it was supposedly difficult to find a good man with a child. Kate's mother's men were varied, indifferent, aggressive. The current stepfather constantly picked on Kate. Everything she did was wrong. He yelled at her mother, sometimes used his hands, especially when drunk. Eleanor Smith discovered a horrible thing. Kate didn't want to go home. That's why she stayed late at school. When it was warm, she wandered the streets until night or sat somewhere and then returned when everyone was asleep. There was nowhere to go. With an aggressive man and a constantly irritated mother, Kate felt unwanted in the way, believed that everyone would be better off without her. The girl poured out her soul. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Eleanor Smith hugged Kate, said comforting words, and was angry. Angry at the mother who didn't appreciate such a gift of fate. A wonderful girl. Beautiful, subtle, capable. Kate didn't study well. But when was she supposed to study? If she tried to get home when everyone was asleep, she learned not to provoke rudeness or even punishment. Eleanor Smith became even more attentive to Kate. A warm, trusting relationship developed between them. Sometimes the girl would come to the teacher's house after lessons. It was quiet, calm there, she could study. Kate even improved her grades. Victor, Eleanor Smith's husband, was shocked. He initiated an inspection by the guardianship authorities. He thought maybe they would at least hold the adults accountable. But according to the results of the inspection, the family was deemed prosperous. Renovations, a separate bed, a full refrigerator. Eleanor Smith choked on this lie, on the detachment from the sad reality. But what else could be done? Kate didn't write poems. She couldn't sing. She didn't want to dance. Needlework didn't attract her. Eleanor Smith couldn't find what would help Kate endure. The girl needed strength to grow into a normal person, to become strong, to become independent. Kate transformed from an awkward girl into a pretty young woman. She didn't make friends among classmates, but she started socializing with guys from a nearby college. Eleanor Smith kept a close eye on her student. She feared that circumstances would push her onto a slippery slope. She talked a lot with Kate, told her about the dangers awaiting teenagers. In essence, she was doing her mother's job. Okay, Eleanor Smith? Kate nodded, promising not to do anything foolish, and thanked Eleanor Smith every time. You do more for me than Mom, she would sometimes say. Nonsense, Eleanor Smith objected. Mom feeds you, gives you drink, buys you shoes, and you warm her heart. Eleanor Smith saw that Kate was drawn to her, listened to her, and yet she was very worried. Katie was at such a difficult age, and the only significant adult in her life was her history teacher. It shouldn't be like that. And then Kate disappeared. The evening before she had stopped by. Eleanor Smith was delighted, invited her to the table. The girl had dinner. They talked a lot, laughed. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. Only before leaving, Kate suddenly held out a locket. Inexpensive, but pretty. Costume jewelry resembling silver. This is for you. Thank you, what a lovely thing. But there's no holiday? Just take it anyway. Thank you, Kate. Kate left. And only then did Eleanor Smith realize that the locket opened. Inside was a photo of Kate. The picture was recent. The girl smiled cheerfully, looking like a model. A beauty. Eleanor Smith was happy with the gift. She perceived it as a sign of attention. A sensitive girl, a grateful teenager was a rarity. And yet, the gesture seemed strange, unsettling. The next day, Kate was gone. She didn't appear at school, wasn't at home. Her mother, late at night. But this time, it became clear. Something extraordinary had happened. Kate, being a minor, was immediately searched for. It was no joke. A 16-year-old teenager had disappeared. Wanted posters were hung around the city. There were many theories. They also talked about her being a victim of a criminal. But Eleanor Smith was sure. Kate had run away. Possibly not alone. The girl knew yesterday that she would leave, and the locket with the photo was a farewell gift. Eleanor Smith told the investigator about this detail, but he dismissed it, didn't take it into account. The leading theory was kidnapping. Kate was never found. Her mother, after some time, met a new boyfriend and went away with him. She, like Eleanor Smith, was sure. Her daughter was alive. She had just run away because she didn't want to study, and they made her at home. She found a boyfriend and was enjoying life, youth, freedom. Eleanor Smith never heard about her student again, although she tried to find out her fate. The locket remained as a memento. It was kept in her jewelry box. Sometimes Eleanor Smith would take it out, open it, and gaze at Kate's cheerful face. Where was this girl now, already an adult woman? How had her fate turned out? For some reason, it seemed that such an escape could not end well. Eleanor Smith blamed herself for not stopping Kate that evening, for not asking about her plans. After all, the gift had made her uneasy. But the girl, she looked happy then. Yes, exactly happy. It was strange, but comforting. Eleanor Smith thought that the girl's life had finally improved because a joyful light shone in her eyes. And look how it turned out. You can't save everyone, Victor would comfort her. He saw how his wife tormented herself with guilt. I know, all sorts of things happen in the hospital. Trouble just happens. Even if you've done everything to prevent it, there's nothing you can do. Eleanor Smith understood. Her husband was right, but she still tormented herself with thoughts of Kate. The unknown was the most terrible thing. She so wanted to believe that everything had turned out well for the girl. But that was self-deception. What good could happen to a runaway teenager unwanted by her parents? Victor, her beloved husband, best friend, closest person, smart, serious, strict at work, gentle, and kind with her, together since they were 20. They met at an amusement park as students. They never parted until death separated them 7 years ago. Victor held a leadership position, chief doctor of the regional hospital. The work was stressful, responsible. He was loved and respected for his professionalism. He loved his work, and Eleanor Smith understood him. She felt the same way about her own work. Victor passed away right at his workplace from a sudden heart attack. So many doctors nearby, and they couldn't save him. Trouble just happens, Victor had once said, and it happened. Trouble did. Eleanor Smith fell into apathy. Perhaps only her work pulled her out then. At school, whether you wanted to or not, you had to keep going. Students and colleagues distracted her, gradually brought her back to life. And then retirement. And she felt completely alone, needed by no one. She hadn't imagined this time like this. They had planned to travel. They had the money. Victor, serious and responsible, had opened a savings account long ago. They were saving for a happy old age. Only Eleanor Smith's old age turned out not to be so happy. 2 years after retirement passed in adaptation. No notebooks, no calls, no answers at the board, no meetings, no holidays. Eleanor Smith thought about a dacha, about land, but she realized in time that she couldn't manage alone. If only Victor were here. Instead, she set up a real conservatory in the living room. Flowers were everywhere, not just on the windowsills, her home garden, even 2 birch trees in tubs. She liked taking care of plants. Like children, they needed care, attention, love. Eleanor Smith stopped to catch her breath. Such walks were difficult. The insidious disease reminded her of itself. And what next? The doctors made it clear miracles don't happen. The condition will only worsen. How hard it was at such a moment not to have family nearby. Her head had ached sometimes before, so at first she didn't pay attention. If it ached, she'd take a pill. Then dizziness and nausea were added. The migraine became daily. Then she went to the hospital. They ordered everything necessary. Tests, ultrasound, MRI. The verdict sounded like thunder. The tumor was inoperable, rapidly progressing. Nothing could be done. Only pain relief. "How much time do I have?" she asked, looking the doctor in the eye. "Tell me honestly. I have no one. I need to finish my affairs myself. I need to know." It's hard to say how the disease will behave. I think a minimum of a year, maximum. In your case, no more than 2 years. A year. Only 2 summers, 2 New Years, 2 birthdays. At best. Only then did Eleanor Smith realize how much she loved her life, even this one. Childless, lonely. It became scary. Truly scary. At first, she had trouble falling asleep, thinking about the approaching end. And so a year passed. The last months flowed by. The woman had gotten used to the thought. It no longer frightened her so much. Eleanor Smith knew when things got really bad, she would go to a hospice under supervision. They would take care of her there. She just wished that moment would come later. She had her plants. Who would take care of them? And generally, lately, she had particularly valued life. She admired the white clouds, rejoiced in the warm sun. Even in the gray, leaden clouds that covered the sky, she saw a special beauty. Restrained, cold. Eleanor Smith caught her breath and walked on. Her path led to the store. She chose the distant supermarket specifically to walk through the park. The weather wasn't conducive to walks, and it was hard to walk. But without physical activity, the body might give up sooner. Doctors recommended daily walks, and she walked. She chose the time of rush hour. People walked quickly around her, coming from work. Some to the store, some to the kindergarten for their child. They seemed to live in a different time, hurrying, bustling. Eleanor Smith could walk slowly, admire the scenery. And yet once, like this youth, she had hurried, rushed. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a hunched figure on a bench. The sensitive woman immediately understood. This person was in trouble. She approached closer, looked intently. A young woman was sitting on the bench, dark-skinned, black-eyed. Her clothes were old, cheap. In her arms was a bundle like one from a maternity hospital. She was rocking the bundle and crying. Yes, crying. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Nobody noticed the tears. People hurried past. They didn't even pay attention. And even if a glance had fallen, they wouldn't have seen the tears. The stranger sat half-turned, her back to the path. Probably she didn't want to be seen. Eleanor Smith understood that she couldn't leave. The girl looked in her early 20s and a baby in her arms. She couldn't just leave her. She hesitated for a long time before speaking. It was awkward to intrude. How would she react? but she saw no other way. "Hello," she said, sitting down next to her. "Excuse my curiosity, but what's wrong? Can I help?" The girl turned her tear-stained face. In her burning black eyes, surprise. She clearly hadn't expected sympathy. "Thank you," she replied politely. "You probably can't help. It's a hopeless situation." "That's not true. There's always a way out. I'm telling you this from the height of my years. There's no such thing as no way out." Eleanor Smith smiled warmly. "There is, I tell you, but it's a long and unpleasant story. You're probably in a hurry?" "Well, if there's one thing I have plenty of, it's free time," Eleanor Smith countered. "And I just love life stories." "What time is it now?" The girl perked up. "Almost 6. Kindergarten is open until 7, so I have an hour. If you have time, listen." Clara was born in a Roma camp. She and her mother were treated with disdain. Clara was punished more often. She always got the worst of it. As she grew up, she realized her mother was a stranger here. 70 years ago, a young girl had run away with her beloved to the camp. Clara's grandmother, her father's mother, adored her granddaughter, no matter what. Clara was the only girl among her grandmother's sons, long awaited. Finally, the old woman would say, "The one has been born to whom I can pass on my gift." Grandmother never heard Clara. They talked for a long time, walked in the meadows where the camp stopped. Grandmother showed her medicinal plants, told her about their power, often held her granddaughter's hand. Clara felt the familiar warmth transfer from her grandmother. The Roma said that's how old Vera passed on the gift, little by little. They resented that the priceless gift was going to a stranger. Yes, Clara was called a stranger in the camp, although she was born and raised among them. The attitude towards her mother was much cooler. Clara remembered her mother as a silent, detached, beautiful woman. The father who brought her quickly grew cold. The pressure of the camp played a role. He had long since taken a new wife who had borne him 3 sons. Clara and her mother lived with grandmother. Vera loved her granddaughter, spent a lot of time with her, but she kept her mother more like a servant, silent. The old woman didn't pity her daughter-in-law. Clara always felt sorry for her mother. Even as a child, she understood. Something had broken this beautiful young woman. External circumstances had made her weak-willed, indifferent. Mom. She didn't even care about her daughter. She lived in her own world, like an enchanted princess. She performed tasks mechanically. She spoke little, only when necessary, and she never hugged Clara, and she so wanted a mother's embrace to see tenderness in her eyes, or at least interest. Grandmother didn't love her mother, but that wasn't the main thing. Vera gave her shelter, food, clothing, and she tried to cure her, to bring her back to life. Clara saw this. Vera gave her infusions, read incantations. The girl hoped it would work, but her mother remained the same, cold, detached. Not enough strength, grandmother lamented. Deep in her soul is sadness, longing. No one loved her. That's terrible, you understand? It cripples the soul. That's why your mother couldn't bear it. But I love her, Clara exclaimed. That's what gives hope. Perhaps not all is lost. And also, grandmother sees your gift. Soon it will fully pass to Clara, It will bloom. You will be stronger than me. The old woman smiled, stroking her granddaughter. They, all these Roma who don't accept you, will fawn over you, beg you to save them or their children from illnesses. Many things can be fixed with herbs. Only in serious cases turn to the gift. It's not a toy. You'll grow up, you'll understand. And then, one day, when Clara was 11, her mother fell ill. Quiet, emotionless, absent, as always. She lay for a week, and in the morning she didn't get up. Pale, detached, breathing heavily. Grandmother became worried, got out her remedies, books, sent Clara outside. The girl sat by the wagon, praying that grandmother would pull her mother through. But her inner feeling told her it wouldn't happen. And so it was. Clara sat for about 3 hours. Then grandmother came out. From her sad face, the girl understood everything. Mom was gone. Clara took the loss hard. Yes, her mother didn't show feelings, but her presence gave her strength. Most importantly, hope lived on, that someday everything would change. Mom will wake up, the spells will break, she will smile, hug her, and a different life will begin. Happy, warm. Grandmother supported her as best she could, tried to understand the child. 2 years passed. One morning, Vera sat Clara down, warning her of a serious conversation. I had a dream, grandmother began. Not a simple one. I understood that I wouldn't be here much longer. No, grandmother, Clara exclaimed. After her mother, the most terrible fear was losing her grandmother. Then she would be completely alone. Her father had forgotten about her. He lived with his new family. The other Roma didn't accept her. Only grandmother. Only she loved her truly. Let her stop saying terrible things. Clara, understand, it must be this way. Give me your hand. I will pass on the gift completely. I no longer need it. Clara obediently held out her palm. Grandmother squeezed it with her dry hand, and the girl felt the familiar warmth transfer to her. A pleasant feeling, but scary. Grandmother was never wrong. How will I live without you? I know, my dear. You're scared. Grandmother stroked her granddaughter's head. She looked with sadness. Clearly, she didn't want to leave the girl either. Without her, Clara was weak, vulnerable. They never accepted you here. Listen carefully. When I am gone, leave the camp. Otherwise, they will make you a servant. They will wear you out. Your gift must serve good people. It is given to save. So as soon as I am gone, go. At night, it's warm, good. You'll easily reach the city. Anyone that's nearby. Ask where the shelter, the orphanage is, and go there. Ask to be taken in as a child. They won't refuse. You'll be among strangers, but warm and fed. You'll grow up. You'll get stronger. Clara watched her grandmother closely, looking for signs of illness. But she looked as usual, cheerful, lively. The girl began to think that grandmother was mistaken, or that the terrible thing wouldn't happen soon. But one morning, grandmother didn't get up. Clara, already knowing what was wrong, slowly approached the loved one and was convinced that grandmother wasn't here, but very far away. Only the body remained. The girl sobbed loudly, for a long time, convulsively. Then it became easier. She sat down by grandmother's bed and thought, grandmother is gone. I need to leave. Now, before anyone finds out. before anyone stops me. Clara understood. They didn't love her because she was a stranger. Some were hostile. Only grandmother, who was authoritative in the camp, restrained them. She helped with toothaches, migraines. Because of this, they tolerated her granddaughter. Now the protector was gone. It was time to run. Clara knew the city was not far. Yesterday, they drove past a lovely little town. She admired the lights, the towers. Not a metropolis, but not tiny either. There was definitely a shelter there. So that's where she needed to go. She quickly packed her things into a backpack and, unnoticed, left. She walked for a long time along a country road through the fields, trudging toward the city. The unknown frightened and fascinated her. Tears flowed from the emotions. She didn't wipe them. No one could see anyway. She felt tiny, insignificant. But she knew. A strong gift sat inside her. It wouldn't let her perish, it would help. Finally, she reached the city, asked for directions to the orphanage, found it, opened the door, asked to see the director. A strict lady in glasses listened attentively. This was a prepared story with a grain of truth. She said she was born in a camp, didn't specify she was half Roma. Her parents died. The Roma made her a servant. A widower threatened to take her as his wife. She ran away from a hard life. She chose a different path. She dreamed of studying, getting a profession. It was difficult, but Clara was registered, given documents. It took a long time to get used to it. Everything was different, confusing. High beds, clean linen, different clothes, food, schedule, studying. Clara liked studying. She needed to catch up. At first, even here, they treated her as a stranger. Exotic appearance, unusual story. But it wasn't contempt, but interest. In a few months, she had to tell her story dozens of times. She became a local celebrity. Then life fell into a routine. She finished 9th grade, trained as a commodity expert, turned 18, graduated. She received an apartment from the state as an orphan, got a job. Not in her profession. She needed experience. She stood at the cash register in a supermarket. The pay was decent. Clara felt happy and, most importantly, normal, not second rate, like in the camp. A full-fledged person. She perceived her past life as a fairy tale. Much seemed like invention. For example, grandmother's gift, which she supposedly passed on. Time passed. The superpower didn't manifest itself. Clara decided she had imagined it. It hadn't happened. One day, the supermarket was being renovated. Employees took turns watching the workers. On one shift, Clara met a handsome guy. Tall, lean, athletic, fair hair, light blue eyes, an open smile. He immediately showed interest, winked. Clara smiled back. Guys had approached her before. She had a striking appearance, she knew, but it never went beyond a couple of dates. But with Andrew, everything was different. From the first glance, a strong, warm feeling arose. Clara understood immediately. They didn't date for long. After a few dates, they decided to live together in Clara's apartment. Andrew wasn't local. He was from a village, from a large family. He worked on a construction site, dreamed of a house. For now, he lived in rented accommodation. Andrew took on all the men's work around the house. He glued the wallpaper, fixed the curtain rod, repaired the wardrobe. It turned out he cooked wonderfully. It seemed there was nothing he couldn't do. Life had taught him. It was good, warm, and cozy together. They understood each other without words. Finally, Clara felt happy and loved. She hadn't even dreamed of such a relationship. Andrew and Clara got married. Soon, the young wife realized she was expecting. There was no limit to their joy. She wasn't afraid of the added responsibilities. Everything was great. A roof over their heads, comfort. Andrew earned well. Their son Theodore was born. Andrew chose the name. It was his grandfather's name. A year and a half later, a daughter, Catherine. Clara named her after her mother. The cares of the little ones, the household, everything delighted and absorbed her. She enjoyed her role as wife and mother. It wasn't easy at times, but it was all for her loved ones. Reliable Andrew, sweet Theo, and Kathy. The little ones started kindergarten. It became easier. Clara started thinking about going back to work, leaving maternity leave early. Her plans were ambitious. They dreamed of expanding, turning the one-room apartment into a two-room, a three-room, then a house. More space. It was cramped for a large family in one room. And then Clara realized she was expecting another child. She was scared. They hadn't planned for a large family so soon. It wasn't the time. Andrew supported her, reassured her. Everything will be fine. I'll work more. There are plenty of opportunities to pick up extra work on the construction site. The trouble happened when Clara was a month away from giving birth to her youngest daughter. There was very little time left. That morning, she didn't want to let her husband go. A vague premonition gnawed at her. Clara chased away the bad thoughts, attributing it to her condition. The term was near. 2 hours later, they called with terrible news. Andrew was crushed by a concrete block. They couldn't save him. Clara sobbed, howled like a wounded animal. The children were at kindergarten. She could give vent to her feelings. She cursed fate, which had treated her so cruelly, called out to Andrew. Then she felt his presence, inexplicably. She just knew Andrew was there. He saw her, wanted to comfort her, but couldn't, and it hurt him. Clara pulled herself together, said aloud that she loved him very much, understanding that he wouldn't hear her anymore, and that she needed to be strong for the children. You can rest assured I'll manage. And Clara tried. She tried very hard to be strong. At times, it was unbearable. Due to stress, labor started earlier. She had to leave the children with the neighbors. Where else? They had planned for Andrew to take time off. But fate twisted things. The girl was born small, but strong. Clara named her Anna. That's what Andrew had wanted. And the young woman was left with 3 small children without support. Clara applied for benefits, but the money wasn't enough. The children were growing, they needed clothes, shoes, and they were often sick. She had to spend fabulous sums at pharmacies. What could she do? Health came first. This is where the gift would have come in handy. If she could rid the little ones of colds, but the gift slept, or maybe it didn't exist. There wasn't enough money, and Clara took a step that seemed like a fatal mistake. She took out a loan. The money was in her hands instantly. She bought groceries, medicine, updated their wardrobe. But she had to repay it with high interest. At first, She paid regularly. Then the children fell ill. She had to spend a fortune on treatment, and Clara missed a payment. They put her on the meter. The debt grew at a frantic pace. It was a common scheme. Collectors started bothering her. She couldn't go back to work. Annie was too young. Couldn't even leave her for a couple of hours. She lost her apartment. They took it for debts. The loan was secured by the property. Clara clutched her head. Where could she go with 3 little ones? What had she done? The neighbors advised her to register at a shelter. She could live there for 3 months. Time to find a job, get settled. But what could Clara do? Who would hire her with 3 children, one an infant? How could she work if she couldn't leave Annie and the older ones were sick? And that's my whole story. In a week, of course, I couldn't find a job or an apartment. How could I? I have Annie. Where would I put her? And what now? The former teacher gasped. Clara's story was incredible, like a fairy tale. But this wasn't a movie. It was real life. And the young woman with 3 little ones had nowhere to go. How terrible. They'll take them to a shelter. They'll grow up in state institutions like I did, only with a living mother who is worthless, who can't provide normal conditions. Saying this, Clara started crying again, quietly, unnoticed. But Eleanor Smith saw everything, understood the desperate situation. Here's what, the old woman said decisively. Move in with me. A strange, risky offer to invite an unfamiliar family. Eleanor Smith knew her neighbors would judge, but she didn't care. Clara and the children needed help. If she didn't reach out, the little ones would go to a shelter, the mother to the streets. 4 broken lives. Eleanor Smith had nothing. She was living out her days. She would do this, even with the risk. What was there to lose? Clara didn't believe it. What about relatives? Will they be against it? I have no one. Eleanor Smith placed a hand on her shoulder. Let's go to the kindergarten for the little ones. Then to the store. We need to buy something for dinner. I have guests now. Eleanor Smith rejoiced at the chance meeting more each day. Clara turned out to be a pleasant, kind person. Hardworking, grateful, sensitive, and the children. Her heart melted with tenderness. Syria Theodore, Chatty Cathy, Plump Annie. Eleanor Smith baked them pancakes, pies, feeling like a grandmother. It was a pleasant feeling, indescribable. Eleanor Smith and Clara often talked heart to heart. Both of them needed warmth, care, attention, the absence of the feeling of loneliness. Completely strangers in just a few weeks. Eleanor Smith told her about her diagnosis. If only I had that gift, Clara shook her head bitterly. Time passed. Eleanor Smith's condition worsened. Naturally, the doctors had warned her it was time to move to a hospice under supervision. Clara saw her off with tears. In the ambulance, Eleanor Smith tried to dissuade her from the troublesome step. She still had to go home with tiny Annie. Eleanor Smith had taken care of Clara in advance. She willed her the apartment. Neighbors gossiped. She'll kill you to get the apartment faster. She'll poison you. But Eleanor Smith was sure of Clara. You couldn't fake that. She was a good judge of people. Clara was attached to her, afraid of losing another loved one. She talked about it many times, cried. Why do all the close people leave? Why am I always left alone? Learning about the diagnosis, Clara broke down, sobbing sincerely. Eleanor Smith comforted her, promised that everything would be all right. Clara later apologized for her weakness. It was quiet, calm, and cozy in the hospice. Friendly doctors, high doses of medication to relieve the pain. Eleanor Smith spent her time in a semi-conscious state. Her mind was clear, her soul calm. Clara visited often, placed her palm on her forehead, looked into her eyes. After she left, Eleanor Smith felt better. Strength returned. Perhaps from the feeling that someone needed her. Someone cared about her. Several weeks passed. Surprisingly, Eleanor Smith felt better. She had the strength to walk in the hospital garden. She admired the flowers again, the blue sky, enjoyed fate's farewell gift. There might not be another improvement. Her tests, strangely enough, also improved. The doctors were surprised, but said it happened sometimes. A lull before the storm. Eleanor Smith suddenly wanted to visit home one more time, to see Clara, the little ones, breathe in the familiar scent, take something as a memento. The locket, the one Kate had given her, a thing with a story. It would be good to have it here in the hospice, as a reminder of home, of her past life. She asked the doctor for permission. He agreed. She called a taxi and went. Amazing. She hadn't thought she would leave the hospice alive. This wasn't recovery, not deliverance, but not feeling pain, going where she wanted. Strength in her legs and arms, lightness in her whole body. She opened the door with her own key. The apartment was quiet, empty. Understandable, Clara and Annie were out for a walk. The little ones were at kindergarten. She walked through the rooms, touched her favorite things. The rocking chair, the plush bear Victor had won, the soft blanket. Here was the bedside table with the drawer where her jewelry was. She wasn't interested in the expensive chains, rings. She came for the locket. She found the thing, opened it, admired Kate's cheerful face. Where is she now? A sound was heard. Eleanor Smith hurried to meet it. You're home, Clara gasped. She sat Annie down, came closer. In her eyes, joy, surprise. Yes, I felt better. They let me out for a bit. Felt better? Clara smiled. Really? It worked? What worked? Eleanor Smith didn't understand. It's my gift, you see? I was worried about you. I didn't want to lose another close person. I've already had so many losses. I cried when the children weren't looking. And one day, I had a dream. Grandmother Vera. She sternly told me I had to stop crying, that it was time to show my gift. She said it would be difficult, that it had taken her effort, and it will all be in vain if I didn't pull you through, and I did it. I awakened the power. Grandmother helped too. Eleanor Smith blinked in confusion. Well, I'll be. Is it really true? She remembered how light she felt after Clara's visits, how hot her hands were. Not just hot. Then she thought it was because of the illness. What did the doctor say? Clara herself couldn't believe in a miracle. They said the test improved, but it could be a lull before the storm. There won't be any storm. Clara smiled broadly, hugged Eleanor Smith tightly. The storm is canceled. My gift has awakened. It awakened to save you. Don't believe it? You'll see. Everything will be fine. Clara clasped her hands in emotion. Her coal black eyes shone with joy. Little Annie didn't understand anything, but she felt the good energy, smiled like her mother. "Oh, what's that you have?" Clara noticed the locket. "Interesting thing. I feel a special energy, warm, good. It's a gift from a student, a former one. It was a long time ago." Eleanor Smith couldn't process what had been said. The end is canceled? She'll live? And now she wanted to live especially. There were the little ones who loved her, who needed her. She wanted to see them grow up, to support them on their difficult path. Life wasn't easy. People needed help, support, understanding, love. Clara turned the locket over. Something about it attracted her. She lifted the lid with her fingernail. A surprised gasp. She covered her mouth with her hand. "It's my mother," she said, pointing at Kate's photo. "She's younger here, but it's definitely her. I recognize her." "It can't be!" Eleanor Smith hadn't recovered from one shock, and here was another. "It just doesn't happen like that." "It does, apparently. It's definitely Mom. The eyes, the lips, the nose. I remember her face in detail." "What was your mother's name?" "Kate. I named my older daughter after her." "Of course. How could I not have guessed right away? My student's name was Kate. She disappeared as a teenager. I didn't help her. I didn't understand. She ran away to a Roma camp with a Roma man, and then she gave birth to me. Incredible. I couldn't help Kate, but I helped her daughter. And you. You saved me." All of this was yet to be fully grasped. But at that moment, Eleanor Smith was finally convinced that the illness had receded, that she now had a life.